We're starting with a dramatic raid by combined Israeli security forces intercepted a Jenin-based terrorist cell en route to carrying out a shooting attack, and ILTV Steve Leibovich reports.
A combined IDF, Shin Bet, and National Anti-Terror Unit operation intercepted the Jenin-based cell as it drove toward Mevou Dotan, near the village of Arabe. The 3 terrorists were killed yesterday as they were en route to carrying out the terror attack. It was a daytime operation that scored a surgical hit. The leader of the terror cell was identified as Naif Sawis, aged 26.
במהלך השעות האחרונות אנחנו מזהים חוליה שבדרכה לבצע פיגוע. צה"ל, שב"כ וימ"מ נערכים ומסירים את האיום הזה שהיה לעבר אזרחי מדינת ישראל. אנחנו נמשיך במערכה לסיכול הטרור.
The army says that the cell was planning a shooting attack and had been involved in previous attacks. Security forces found and seized an M16 automatic rifle and ammunition inside the vehicle of the cell.
Friends and relatives gathered at Kibbutz Re'im yesterday at the funeral of Chen Amir, the municipal patrolman who confronted and was killed by the terrorist gunman in Tel Aviv on Saturday. ILTV's William Sharon reports.
Chen Amir, the 42-year-old father of 3, was eulogized as a man willing to give of himself to his family and to his nation. Amir was also eulogized by his fellow patrol officers who cried over his grave. Oz, the municipal patrolman who was on duty with Amir when he was killed and who shot the gunman dead, said, "As soon as he shot you, I shot him. I avenged your death. Watch over me, please. Watch over us. You were such a fighter." Since the attack, the Shin Bet arrested several individuals suspected of involvement with the Jenin-based terrorist Kamal Abu Bakr. The suspects are family members of the dead terrorist, and security officials are investigating possible assistance given the gunman to enter Israel and make his way to Tel Aviv. They are also tracing the gun used by the terrorist. Israel's security services are still trying to learn what the terrorist plan was, and specifically whatever he intended to carry out the attack during anti-judicial reform demonstrations in Tel Aviv. Overnight, border police and IDF forces in the village of Romana mapped out the house of the terrorist for demolition. During the operation, a bomb was thrown at the Israeli forces, who responded with live fire. 4 wanted personnel were arrested.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that his government will advance the law to change the Judicial Selection Committee. Netanyahu also told Bloomberg the other part of the judicial reforms originally proposed will not be legislated. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
News on Prime Minister Netanyahu's plans for judicial reform is still coming from the American news media. Netanyahu told Bloomberg that the central law on the Judicial Selection Committee will be advanced because it's needed to restore an historic balance, and that the rest of the judicial reform program will be shelved.
It would probably be about the composition of the committee that elects judges.
With the selection of the judges?
Yes.
How they're selected?
Right. That's basically what's left. And because other things, I think we should not legislate. I don't think we should move from one extreme where we have perhaps the most activist judicial court on the planet to getting to a point where the legislature, our Knesset, can just knock out any decision that the court makes. There has to be a balance.
The comments by the Prime Minister were rejected by opposition leader Yair Lapid as what he called a display of weakness and lies. The comments were also widely rejected by the protest movement that's been staging mass demonstrations for the past 31 weeks. Staying on the issue of judicial reform, the High Court has issued an injunction demanding answers from the Knesset on the Prime Minister's recusal law. Justices ask why the legislation shielding the PM from recusal should not begin from the next election, making it less personal and tailored to Netanyahu. An expanded panel of 11 judges will hear petitions on the issue at the end of September.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
And joining us now with more on Prime Minister Netanyahu's latest sayings to foreign media is journalist Aviv Bushinsky. Aviv, great having you here today.
Thank you, Amit. Same.
Now, let's begin with this. Netanyahu says he plans to pass judicial selection and then halt the judicial reform. Do you think that's really the plan moving forward? And what does that actually mean for the country, for Israel?
I think it's a bit deceiving if you'll look carefully or listen carefully to what Netanyahu said at the Bloomberg station, is that he wants to reach a consensus, and by reaching this consensus also to legislate this new form of electing judges. But I must say that my gut feeling is that no such consensus is feasible. And then the question is, will Netanyahu do it unilaterally without the consensus, without the agreement of the opposition, or will abandon the plan? And this is what everybody's going to look for. And if you look at the three significant dates, Amit, that Israel is going to have, is one, of course, August 16, when we are going to open the light train, but I think that this is a different story. And then it's September 12, when the 15 Supreme Court judges will sit and decide whether to accept or abolish the Reasonability Act. And of course, September, I think 28, if I'm not mistaken, the Incapacity Act, whether Netanyahu can be in a safe haven or can be toppled by the advisor to the legal advisor to the prime minister. So I think that, let's say the Supreme Court or the High Court of Justice will decide that the act of Reasonability Act should be abolished. Then what? Netanyahu will say, okay, they didn't adhere to our decisions, so we're going to change the framework of the judges and we'll elect different judges. I think it can't work. So in other words, or to cut the long story short, if it won't work by a consensus, then it won't work. And I think that Netanyahu said something that it would be very, very hard for him to deliver.
You know, what he also said is that on the one hand, the prime minister says, he knows that additional reforms are unnecessary and even unfair, but that this repairs a certain imbalance in the courts. Then we stop and move to other issues. I mean, is that where Netanyahu is at right now?
I think that Netanyahu wishes to put this whole ordeal aside. You can see the approval rating that he's declining in the approval rating. Benny Gantz is passing him. Though it doesn't mean much, but I think that Netanyahu is unhappy with it. Netanyahu is planning to have a short vacation up north. He's going to see the tons of demonstrators that said that he'll have a sleepless night. I don't think that Netanyahu enjoys the moment. But when he says that we're going to just fix the committee of electing, or the system of how we're going to elect the Supreme Court judge, and we're going to stop then, this is not a minor reform. This is maybe the most fundamental reform out of 3 or 4 reforms that Netanyahu and the coalition is planning to do. So again, I think that it is a bit deceiving, and he faces now not only some discomfort from the U.S. administration, from the different individuals, leader economy people, but also in the Likud party. There are at least 5 Likud members or Knesset members. A few of them are even ministers. If it's Avi Dichter, maybe Gallant, of course, Dani Danon, and others that say we won't be puppets. We won't just adhere to what Netanyahu and the rest of the coalition is contemplating. And if the new reform with changing the system of electing judges will come to the table, in other words, to the Knesset, don't count on us. And I think that Netanyahu should take it seriously. So he has too many obstacles, too many challenges. And going back to what you asked, Amit, I think that Netanyahu would be more than happy to put it aside and focus on other things. And even he said in the interview that he wishes to have peace with Saudi Arabia. So I think that this should be his end game, and not drowning in this swamp of judicial reforms or revolution.
Aviv, just really quickly in one sentence, how do you expect the opposition and the streets to react to these latest comments by Bibi?
First of all, as long as it's on the table, the streets will be, we're going to see demonstration in different volumes. But it's a good question what the opposition will do. I'm not talking about content. Maybe it's right or wrong to agree or disagree with the reforms, but it doesn't serve their political aspirations. So I think that at the end of the day, if Netanyahu will seek for consensus via the opposition, he won't get it because the opposition has a different task to replace the current government.
Aviv, thank you so much for joining us today. 4 Syrian soldiers were killed in airstrikes near Damascus. 4 additional Syrian soldiers were wounded in the attack presumed to have been carried out by Israel. The Syrian state media said that the airstrikes were conducted from the direction of the Golan Heights and that there were considerable material damage to warehouses belonging to Iranian-backed Syrian militias. Syrian air defense systems reportedly attempted to fire at the incoming missiles. The strikes on Monday morning were the first alleged Israeli airstrikes reported in Syria since late July. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defends measures to support the Palestinian Authority, aiming to stabilize the region. And as the country navigates through complex geopolitical dynamics, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen underscores the potential for groundbreaking peace with Saudi Arabia while addressing regional threats posed by Hezbollah and Iran. A range of measures intended to support the Palestinian Authority was discussed on Sunday's cabinet meeting. These measures are anticipated to move forward despite the aftermath of the deadly terrorist attack in Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu aimed to address concerns particularly voiced by Itamar Ben-Gvir regarding the timing of these measures. Ben-Gvir questioned the logic behind offering relief to an entity perceived as supporting terror. Netanyahu sought to reassure by emphasizing Israel's interest in stabilizing the situation to avert a potential PA collapse. Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer highlighted that aiding the PA aligns with promises made to the U.S. administration in response to recent settlement developments in Judea and Samaria. Netanyahu supported the sentiment, emphasizing the importance of honoring commitments, particularly to the United States. In the meantime, in a rare interview with the Arabic-language online newspaper ILTV, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen has asserted that the Palestinian issue will not impede the potential for peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Cohen indicated that Saudi Arabia's entry into the growing list of Arab and Muslim nations establishing peace with Israel would be groundbreaking. He referred to a proposed arrangement involving the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, envisioning a normalization pact between Saudi Arabia and Israel. He also addressed Hezbollah and Iran's aggression, labeling Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah as weak and his provocations as mere posturing, emphasizing that Israel could bring Lebanon to a state of ruin. On Iran, Cohen labeled it as a primary financier of terrorism regionally and globally, comparing its impact to cancer. Princeton University's move to introduce a course titled Decolonizing Trauma Studies from the Global South for the upcoming fall semester is generating intense debate as it includes a book alleging IDF involvement in Palestinian organ harvesting. ILTV's William Sharon has the story.
Princeton University is making headlines with a controversial addition to its upcoming fall semester curriculum, a course titled Decolonizing Trauma Studies from the Global South. We will feature a book that claims of the IDF has been involved in the alleged harvesting of Palestinian organs. The author, Jasbir Puar, a professor and graduate director of Women's and Gender Studies at Rutgers University, has constantly accused Israel of ethnic cleansing against Palestinians. The book, which raised eyebrows upon its release 6 years ago, has ignited further controversy with these claims. Princeton's decision to include this book in its course syllabus has attracted attention and criticism. Last year, the nonpartisan organization Stop Anti-Semitism gave Princeton a B grade in terms of handling of anti-Semitic climate. The organization highlighted concerns about the university's administration prioritizing safety of the Jewish students and the openness of these students to express their support for Israel.
And now embarking on a new phase in the fight against COVID-19, a new contender named EG 5.1 or Eris is making waves globally with a genetic footprint detected across 36 countries and counting. Experts warn of its rapid spread and urge sustained vigilance as its prevalence climbs. A new chapter in the battle against the coronavirus unfolds as a fresh variant EG5.1 or Eris makes its way across the globe. Health experts have issued alerts as this novel coronavirus variant gains ground, with cases now reported in 36 countries. Data from Outbreak Info reveals that as of July 24, the variant has been genetically sequenced in 2,442 instances across various countries, including 18 cases in Israel. The UK Health Security Agency initiated surveillance of Eris in early July due to its rapid global proliferation, particularly in Asian regions. This variant, tracing back to its first identification in March, has been displaying increasing prevalence. Recent statistics show that the percentage of sequenced COVID-19 cases attributed to Eris has risen by almost 3% in just 10 days. Meanwhile, the UK is witnessing a surge in COVID-19 hospitalizations, and so is Japan, which faces a persistent 17-week rise in cases, with hospitalizations up by 14%. In the United States, the Eris variant constitutes 17.3% of cases. Scientists underscore the importance of ongoing surveillance of new variants, expressing apprehension about decreased testing and sequencing efforts worldwide. And now the World Health Organization urges nations to maintain their COVID-19 monitoring infrastructure, including variant tracking and clinical care provisions. And joining us now to maybe calm us down is who, if not head of the immunotherapy lab at the Bar-Ilan University, Dr. Cyril Cohen, to speak to us about this new variant and its consequences. So, Cyril, a novel coronavirus variant known as EG5.1 or Eris has been making headlines recently. What makes this variant unique, and how does it differ from previous variants we've encountered? Should we be getting really worried right now?
Hello, Amit. Basically, what we have seen is that there is a steep rise in the number of cases in several countries. Just to give an estimate of what was calculated in the UK, they moved from, and again, these are predictions, from 600,000 cases to almost 800,000 cases in 1 week. And the main variant driving this rise is the Eris variant that you just mentioned. So the Eris variant is a descendant of the famous XBB recombinant family of variant of the Omicron. These are the good news, basically, because as far as we know right now, we do not see any particular symptom that makes it more, I would say, dangerous than the previous variants. It's still runny nose, it's still headache, fatigue, sneezing, sore throat, but we haven't seen, I would say, a considerable rise in hospitalization. Therefore, I think that we need to be cautious, but also optimistic that this variant, this Eris variant, will be, I would say, in the line of the previous variants. That being said, we did see a slight increase in hospitalization. We just got a report from New York, for example, New York City, in which there was an increase in the past week of 20%. So people assume that this variant is also connected to that rise.
That's like partly good news, I assume. And as you said, we're also seeing an increase in COVID-19 hospitalizations. What do we know about the connection between this variant and the recent rise in hospitalizations, actually?
So this is still under, I would say, examination. People are trying to understand what are I would say, the impact of this particular variant. Basically, what we know is that the main variants right now that are common in several countries are the XBB 1.16 and 1.5 variants. These are the main variants. And therefore, I think that people tend to assume that since that new variant is not that different, there is a central mutation. I don't want to go into specific, but it's at position 455. People would assume that this is more or less the same, I would say, type of pattern that we have seen so far. But some also would argue that it has, I would say, a possibility to evade previous antibodies from infections or previous infections or vaccination. And therefore, this is why we are a little bit, I would say, concerned, but not overly. Therefore, the WHO has put that variant under what we call the category of variant under monitoring.
Now, turning to global surveillance efforts, Cyril, scientists are expressing concerns about decreased testing and sequencing of new variants. What role does surveillance play in our ability actually to track and manage emerging variants? And why is it particularly important as we approach now the fall, the coming winter?
Yes, exactly. So basically, I'll tell you, we are kind of navigating blindly because we, as most of the countries also in Israel, we do not have, I would say the Ministry of Health is no longer, I would say, helping with, the general testing. So it is relying only on people, with regular, lateral flow tests to test themselves. Again, we are at a point where I would say, estimate that this, this pandemic, at least, the pandemic phase is over. We are now in an endemic phase. But there is, as you just asked, there is a very, I would say, there is some importance in monitoring. So we do that with sewer, for example, and we do that in hospitals, but we don't have the full, I would say, picture. What we are afraid of is that, for example, such variants that we have seen can suddenly, mutate into something a little bit more dangerous than what we know, or at least, or I would say, God forbid, combine themselves with another corona from another family that is dangerous. So therefore, we need to monitor that the same way we monitor, for example, flu. As you know, every year we are monitoring flu in order to know what kind of variants will hit us in the fall. So let's pray and hope that the situation will stay as it is, if not better.
Dr. Cohen, thank you for joining us today. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Thank you.
The Israeli national tackle team brought immense Israeli pride as they beat the Spanish national team in the pre-European Championship game last night. And ILTV's Devo Klein has the story.
After months of training and preparing, the Israel national tackle football team played the Spanish national team in the qualifying game for the European Championship last night. The event was hosted at the Kraft Family Sports Compound in Jerusalem, an area that was funded by the Chief Executive Officer of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft. The ceremony started with the playing of both the Spanish and Israeli national anthems, where all players paid respect to their opposing team. Last night's event saw a massive crowd of close to 1,000 American football fans, some traveling from as far away as the Haifa region. With the first touchdown of the game coming from the Spanish team, the game saw an incredible comeback from the Israelis, who spent the fourth and final quarter in a 7-point lead. This lead was held until the end of the game, resulting in a win of 30-23. The Spanish team knelt and Israel was found victorious in their home game. Team Israel is set to face Germany next in their ongoing battle to qualify for the coveted European Championships.
Go Israel. And now also in a stunning comeback, four-time Olympic champion Simone Biles has returned to the world of gymnastics after a 2-year break. Taking the stage at the U.S. Classic, Biles dominated the competition with grace and power, all to the rhythm of Israeli pop star Noah Kirill's Eurovision hit Unicorn. Biles' triumphant return marked her first appearance since the 2021 Tokyo Games, where she battled mental health challenges and disorienting twisties that jeopardized a gymnast's landing. Confident and determined, Biles exclaimed, "I feel really good about where I am right now, mentally and physically." Kirill herself said, "I was so excited and shocked that Simone Biles chose my song Unicorn to make her comeback after 2 years," Kirill said in a recorded interview released to the media. "There is no doubt that she made history, and she is amazing, and that moved me so much. She represents exactly the values that this song represents, and it's one of the craziest things that ever happened to me." Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies and a drop in temperatures are expected tonight as we reach the tail end of the recent heat wave, with lows of around 26 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, partly cloudy skies alongside steady top temperatures reaching highs of around 32 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and of course, do not forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all of the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Amit Harari. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.